So, main thing that I want us to prioritize today is something called a CSS Flexbox. Now, a Flexbox is one of those older additional, one of those older additions to web design as a concept. Because, as I'm sure you may have already noticed, it's kind of a pain in the butt to get your HTML elements and the different pieces of your site that you're trying to put together to fit nicely on the page. And since back in the olden days, back in the ancient PC times, everyone had basically the same size screen if you could even afford a computer in the first place. Now we have tablets, phones, different varieties of monitor sizes are really readily available, which means that different pages laid out on different screens are going to look differently. And with Flexbox, it gives you a little bit of an easier way to sort of understand how those things could look on a smaller screen. A lot easier than if everybody had the same thing. So here's the little W3 Schools demo of what a Flexbox looks like. Into the old-fashioned CSS, you build containers, right? Web design has lots of buckets. Web design has lots of pieces that when you add extra little informations to, it affects how they work, okay? So you can see here, we have all of these dividers, okay, 1 through 8. That is going to represent these boxes right here inside of the flexible boxes container. Now when I resize my window, okay, you can see that they have a little bit of squishiness to them, right? You see how when I reduce, my viewport is another name for a window. They're going to try to maintain the same amount of distance from one another until, if I go the other direction, they have enough room to be full-sized. Okay, so if I keep pulling my viewport wider and wider, let's say it's more like a tablet-sized screen, each one of these div boxes is about the same size. Now if we go the opposite direction, make it a little bit more phone screened, okay, the div boxes are still in the same order, but they're a lot harder to understand what actual information lives inside of these gray boxes, right? This is why Flexbox is a really important addition, because let's say that this is your nav bar and it's got text that is longer than this teensy little amount of space right here. It's going to be hard for your user to understand what they're clicking on or what they're seeing. So you can change a lot of aspects about your Flexbox. For example, if it wraps or not. So if you, oops, wrong screen. You see right here, it says a container, this whole thing, that's set to Flexbox, or set to Flex. If it has no wrap, it means that the content will not wrap around where the line is at the end of the screen. Okay? If we go into W3 Schools, let me refresh so this is, oops, that's the wrong button. Refresh so this is back to full size. We want to change this property right here to say wrap instead of no wrap. Okay? So we just click on that, take the letters NO off, and then click run. Okay. Now, whenever we hit the edge of our screen, you're going to notice that these pieces stay the same size and generally in the same order. So if we go back to our tablet example, our nav bar or our icons or our tabs, if you're creating something Canvas-like or something like Notion or Obsidian where you're trying to organize people's thoughts, Google Sheets maybe, it's going to stay in the same order. Okay. Now if we're on a phone, since the container is now set to wrap, this is okay, pretend we're on an iPod from forever ago, an iPod Touch. Let's go right about here. Now we have the same amount of room within the same order, and everything still is fully visible on our space here. So Flexboxes are super useful tools that I want us to start prioritizing how we use them. So I have 2 videos that I want us to watch real quick, and then I want to show you how you can ask ChatGPT for effective help with these kind of things, and then I want us to try building Flexboxes in our March projects. Okay? These are the main agenda items that I want to hit this morning. So let's start with what a Flexbox actually, how you configure them from scratch. Demo real quick so that we're going to get in Paint.net again, or not Paint.net, but MS Paint. A lot of web design is bucket related, okay? Pretend that's okay. Buckets. All right. if you look at what that video was talking about, we had one major bucket that was the divs specifically for making flex, okay? Whatever rule you set for this bucket is going to go down the family tree, right, this way, like CSS typically does. And whatever rules happen here are going to affect the children that happen here. It's an important little piece of vocab that I want to include real quick. The old way that people used to refer to these things were parents and children, okay? All right? A parent, you want to think about it like on a family tree, is going to set some type of genes or expression. I'm going to put expression. We'll scroll over to the side here. That reflect downward, okay? All right, and now the children or childs of the parents are going to inherit those rules the same way that they do biologically. Inherent rules, but they're also going to have additional, I'm going to just do this for additional info that can change future generations, okay? There was an effort to change these words from parents and children's to ancestors and descendants, which I personally think makes it more confusing, but that is also an option where if you think about your ancestors, what sort of rules did they establish for your expression, for the way that you look, for the way that your things behave, okay? And then the descendants, this one makes a little bit more sense because the more children you have, we have a bucket with 2 buckets inside of here, with 2 more buckets inside of here, right? These rules up here are are still getting reflected down into this layer, and then down into this layer, and then right? Okay. Parents and children are an important way to think about how these buckets interact with one another, because if you've got something going on with the child of your web design project, or if you've got something going on with the children of your Flexbox, it's likely that if there's an issue, it's probably on the parent level because it's all the way back up at the initial rule. Let me erase this real quick. Where is the eraser? There we go. Got it. I don't care about generative erase, actually. So I'm going to get rid of this stuff real quick, and then I'm going to get rid of this very carefully, like this. Okay, so with the understanding that parents and children are words that get thrown around in web design a lot, it always helps to start with a parent bucket that sets your main rule, which you'll see. Let me make this a little bit larger. I'm sorry. I'm gonna set, oh my goodness. It's a good thing I don't teach writing. Anyway, we'll leave that there. Okay, set this as your rule. Okay. With a Flexbox container, like you saw in that video example just a second ago, let me get rid of this. There we go. Every child of a Flexbox container, or like you saw in the initial example, is going to try to follow the rules that their parents set. Okay? So keep that in mind when I'm talking about things like buckets, when I'm talking about things like parents and children. This is the general sort of idea that a computer best understands how to apply different rules. Okay? Does that make sense? Gotcha. Okay. So that being said, let's take a quick look at how the Tailwind version of a Flexbox can work, and then we'll try to put it into our March projects. Quick, what justify is. Okay, let's say we want something on the right-hand side of the page, we want something on the center of the page, and we want something on the left-hand side of the page. Okay. Justification is a graphic design term, or a design term in general, that relates to how pieces in a space are related to one another. Okay? So if we want this piece on the right, these things right here that you've already used before are your justifications. Okay? And these are going to be helpful for when you start using Tailwind when you're trying to position specific things. Okay? Out of option 1, 2, 3, or 4 here, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. Which one should I click on to get my right-sided text on the right side of my Word doc here? Zod. Number 1? Are you sure? Because number 1 is where it's currently set on the left side of the page. Number 3, exactly right. Okay, so we want to justify this to the right, just like that. What about center? Same question. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Any thoughts? 2? I see some 2s. Who agrees with 2? Okay, cool. 2. And then, what do we need to do to the left-hand side here to justify it to the left side of the screen? It's a trick question. Nothing, because it's a default, right? Most of the internet, let me see if I can actually, can I zoom out? Yes. Most of the internet, where'd my mouse go? Come on, man. Let's try this again. Let me draw. There we go. Most of the internet is always going to render from something called the origin point, which is the top left corner of the screen, which means most of the HTML defaults and most of the CSS defaults first go down before they go across. Okay? So, this fourth one is a little bit more graphic design related. It's not going to be one that we're going to be focusing on for this morning, but we'll get into it a little bit later. Okay? So the same way that you have an origin on a graph, you have an origin on a web page. So keep that in mind while this video progresses. When you're trying to justify content, that means position it on the page based in a design system. This is the last thing that I want to show up here before I want you guys to try it yourself. Let's open up our March projects if we haven't already. You're welcome to follow along with me or do this a little bit later after I finish showing you how to do this stuff. It's actually pretty simple to put together a Tailwind Flexbox, right? Let me start my server real quick, npm run dev. Make sure that you are in the command version. If yours says PowerShell, it won't work. And then we hit enter. Normal engine running stuff, right? Why is my VS Code mad at me? Be nice to me. There we go. Okay, look for that purple triangle. You can either hover and follow link, or you can control click. All right, so I'm going to split my screen. Let me get this right here. Oops, hold on. One sec. I don't want all of my stuff here. Okay. So if we're going to make a flexbox on the recipes page, for example, I want to go to that recipes page.tsx, which I'm already here. But I want to make sure that I can see it on my output. Let me get rid of some of this other junk from other examples. All right. So clear all this out, keeping the divs, keeping the H1s. Let's build a little container. Okay. So Control S to refresh. That should clear my recipes page. When you're trying to lay things out, this is where it's important to pay attention to that parent and child relationship, or that ancestors and descendants relationship. And we first want to build up our bucket. All right? So we're going to call a div real quick by just typing the letters div, hit enter, and then hit enter again. Okay? That leaves us line number 8 if your recipes page is blank like mine is. Okay. Now this div does nothing by default. It separates the space out, so if I added an H1 that said space and stuff here, oh, not stud, so make sure that says stuff, okay? That's just going to put text on the screen like it normally would, all right? Now, what we want to do instead is go inside of this div container and give it a class name. Okay, you can just type the word class and then hit arrow key and then enter on class name question mark, and that's going to automatically give us our thing right here. Okay. Now, since Tailwind needs a little bit of extra, or it's based on different types of commands, I want to go into Google real quick and write Tailwind Flexbox. Okay. Let's see how Tailwind CSS asks us to use the grid. Okay. Let me see. Basic example, flex number to allow a flex item to grow and shrink. Div class of flex. Let's start by just writing a div class of flex. Okay. Nothing's going to appear because we currently, let me move that. We currently don't have any content inside of this parent element. We have nothing to actually display. We're just setting up the basics of our tag. All right, so let's add a couple children. Let's add a couple paragraph elements. Call this child1. Okay, enter, p, enter, call it child2. Enter, and then p, enter, call it child3. Okay, Control S to save. Now, you can see that because we've set the div name to flex, it's going to behave like it default does, and just going to line up our children all next to each other in order, right? Oldest to youngest. Another way that you can think about web design is that up here is going to be the oldest. It's going to be the rules that get followed first. These are where the parents live, where the descendants or the ancestors have established the rules. And then the more you go down the stack, or the higher your line number is, those are going to be younger. Okay? So the way that our child 1 is higher on the list than child 2 and child 3 makes child 1 older, putting it in the front of the row. All right? So since we have this div class name of flex, it's going to just line them up one another like this. All right? If we're trying to create this example right here, we need to add a little bit of Tailwind to each of the children so that they also have rules to follow, just like when creatures have children. They change the genes as the things go on. Okay? So, if we go into this paragraph and we add another class name, class name, hit enter, okay? We can set this to have a width of, if we just copy this for example, we can have it set to a width of 14, set the flex to none, and then let's see what happens, okay? Go back to our output. That gives us a little bit more width on child number 1, but let's say child number 2 has a little bit more width. So class name equals width of, let's double it to 28, and then we'll just include the flex none just to be safe. Control S. Okay, that's getting a little larger. And then let's double it again. Class name, enter. We're going to set the width to, what's 28 times 2? 56? Okay, thank you. 56, Control S. Okay. And we can't tell what's happening with child 3 because there's not a fourth child after child 3. So let's add that real quick. Just p enter, child 4. Okay, we've had our fourth sibling. You can see that whatever changes you make to the descendants, whatever changes happen genetically, quote unquote, within the children, are still under the same rule of div class name of flex up in the top box right here. Okay, let's see if I can add a little border so you can see this flex box a little bit better. Border. Okay, apparently I don't know how to do a Tailwind border, so let's do that real quick. Tailwind border, border style. Okay. So we want a border, let's just do a solid border. Border dash solid. Okay. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but there's a lot of things about web design. And if you can see the way I'm doing it, I don't have everything memorized. You also should not have everything memorized. That is the whole point of having all this documentation and all of this available information for you to access, is so that you can understand how pieces work together, and then like Legos, I keep using that example, how you can create it within your specific example. Okay, so let's see why my border is not working. Okay. Let's try, let's just do a border dotted. Let's see if that pops up a little bit better. Okay, border dotted, Control S. Let's refresh my site here. Let's go to light mode. Nope. For some reason, my border is not working, so we're going to get rid of that, just for the meantime. Okay, let me see what I need to do right here. All right, so what if I don't want to automatically add this width every time? Because if I resize my Flexbox, let's make it a little bit more phone-sized, this is still yeah, it's working, but it's not very attractive, right? It's not very easy on the eyes to see what these children are doing in this Flexbox, okay? What you can do is change the justification of the container or change the rule on the parent so that it affects all of the children, okay? And that's very easy. We just want to go into our div class name, our parent class name, add a space, and we want to change the justification, okay? You just write the word justify, and then that's going to give us the options we just saw in the video here. I want them to be centered, not end. Centered, and then Control S to save, okay? Now if I were to go through and change all of these, take these widths off, it should put all of my children in the center, okay? So what we're looking at right here are some triplets because they all have the same rule applied to them. Let's change that up a little bit by adding some space around the outside, okay? So we can add something in the parent called h-full, and then leave the flex, leave the justify center, refresh our page, and that should have given us a little bit more space around the outside, but it didn't for some reason. Let me look around a little bit. Okay, let's see what, hold on, let me see. Gotcha. All right. So I'm using a resource that I'm gonna connect to your thing right here in a second. That allows me to experiment with the Tailwind CSS a little bit to see how my flex could look, but I want to figure out why my border is not working on my my Flexbox. Okay, and this is a good example of how you can prompt ChatGPT effectively to get better help with your pages. Okay, so let's go to chat. If I could spell it right, should be this one. All right. I personally, you don't have to do this, but I recommend being friendly to the AIs, just in case, right? It's going to ask me how my day is. I'm going to say good, but I need a little help with some Tailwind CSS, okay? You want to be talking to these AIs like you would a person, okay? Just because that's going to give you a more approachable result, a more accessible result than maybe previously. Okay, so it's going to ask me what I'm doing with Tailwind. You want to give it very specific prompting, again, as if you were talking to a person, because that's going to give you a more helpful result here at the end. Okay? So you want to say, very specifically, I am trying to add a border to my Flexbox div parent, but it is not appearing in Tailwind. Then I'm going to ask it if I copy and paste my code. This is the important part that I want you to pay the closest attention to, is can you provide me a detailed example with clear steps on how to, parentheses, fix my current issue and help me troubleshoot in the future. Okay, now, again, I know you guys know how to Google things. I know that you have used ChatGPT actually quite a bit more than I have, I imagine, if you can't tell. But the way that you specifically engage with these resources, because they're not going away, the way that you engage with them specifically can be more beneficial. Okay? This can create a better understanding of different things that you're trying to do. It'll give you examples. It'll give you tools for your toolkit that will help you out in the future. Okay? So we're asking with specifics. We have a problem that we're trying to solve. Okay? We're asking it if we can give it a specific type of input, whether that's an upload, a copy and paste, you can upload your whole folder, you can upload your specific sections. You want to be specific in what you want, how you're going to deliver it, and what you are asking ChatGPT to do. Okay? These are things that that will become really, really helpful as we continue to use these AI resources. Okay? So, let's give it a sec. Paste your code here. Let's do that. We're going to take our whole parent and children situation, our entire lineage, so to speak. Control C, Control V, just hit enter. Okay? So now it's going to give me the issue, the fix right here with a little example right here. Okay? And then it's going to walk me through how it changed that. And then it's also going to give me that troubleshooting example in the future with a couple different options. I don't have ChatGPT Pro, so this is just whatever the free version is going to say. Okay? And now we have compiled a resource that not only fixes our issue, but when we have a similar issue in the future, we have a step-by-step process of what we can do to fix it. Okay? I also personally like to thank the AI and then tell it I'm going to do something to see if it works. Okay. All right, so let's try the fix initially. We're going to look right here at the div class name hfull width, so it's height full, width full, border 2. Gotcha. So we just need a little bit more content on our things right here. Let's just take this whole class name like this. Control C, Control V, and let's see if that fixes my issue. Okay, Control V, Control S, go back, look at that. All right, so now we've set a rule for the parent that's not getting inherited by the children. Let's try if we took just this border 2, border black property. Let's see if we add that to our children here. Okay, let me try something. All right, cool. Let me show you a little trick that I learned recently, I was taught recently. If you highlight just one, flex none, and Control V it, you're going to have to repeat that process a couple times. But if you hold your middle mouse button, your mouse wheel, you're able to highlight multiple lines. And I can go from the bottom corner to the top corner, or from the top corner down to the bottom corner. And now that's just going to make a selection on these flex boxes right here. Control V, it's going to replace all three of them. Control S, which means it's going to influence those children around the bottom. Okay? Is this making sense so far? What you can do now, or what I would like you to try, is creating your own Flexbox in your recipes page with a couple of children. They don't need borders. Let me actually add a little bit of... Okay, if you hit space, you're editing all three lines at the same time. Let's add a padding. Padding is like what goes around the outside of an element. Let's just add, let's try 4. Let's see what 4 looks like. Okay, that's going to give a little bit of space around the children, but not a little bit of space around each other. They're still right next to one another. Let's try a margin of the same size, margin 4, Control S. That's going to give us a little bit more space around the pieces. Okay? Now, like I mentioned before I have you guys do this for the last couple minutes, remember that elements in code are going to only take up the amount of space that they require. Okay? So if I put some lorem ipsum, let me see if I can just, there we go. Type lorem, Control S. That's going to fill out my available space while not taking up any more additional space than the other children have already claimed. All right? So if I were to resize this, okay, the Flexbox is not wrapping. It's the last thing that I want to set real quick. so that I don't get this if I'm looking at my phone screen with these really tall columns that aren't using as much space as possible. Okay? Again, I know you know how to Google stuff, but you always want to include that Tailwind Flex wrap is that specific thing that you're looking for, because it wraps around the box. Let's see how we can do that here. Okay, we're just going to set it to flex wrap. So flex dash wrap, Control S, go back to our title, and it's going to wrap with the available space. If I make my more phone sized, it's going to maintain the same order of child 1, 2, 3, 4, based on the style that we've given it. And now we have these nice boxes to see how these pieces are, excuse me, working with one another. So I'm going to leave this code up on the screen. Let me take some of this lipsum off. It's pretty long. Okay. Lorem. If you want placeholder text, you can just write out the word lorem and then hit enter on the wrench. It's called lipsum, lorem ipsum, lorem, 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 etc. Okay, like that. I'm going to leave this code up if you want to copy it directly, but I want you to tinker around with this a little bit, experiment with these flex boxes with these children and these parent relationships, remembering back to these buckets, okay? And then just see what you can lay out on your recipes page. I'm going to Control S to save, and we're going to call it right there.